So the theme this week is producing results, starting by measuring results and finding a measurable start point. So whether in basketball or in business, kind of the thing I've learned over time is like it doesn't matter where you are, you shouldn't really start with a goal until you just measure like where you are. Be able to say you are here and then try to improve it is really the best approach across all aspects, especially basketball. So trying to use games and or practice to just establish what are you measuring, what's your baseline, and how can you improve it. And the contrast I like to make is that games are chaotic, highly variable, but realistic, right? They are the test that we're trying to get better at. But most practices are very much the opposite. They're a controlled environment, they're very predictable reps, and they're unrealistic because they don't have a lot of the chaos or even the decision making factor we've been talking about involved for the players. And so I like to just kind of list off here what do we measure. So some of my favorites in practice is just do anything out of 10 tries, right? Can you get past your defender one on one out of 10 reps? How many times can you do that? Maybe it's two. We got to work on improving your ball handling, everything else, just to get past the defender. Can you finish a layup, right? Maybe we do this as a team. Out of 10 layups, we made two. So that's an indicator I need to work on layup breakdown for Jay. My next practice, we're going to just do that two-step layup for a while and see if we can move that number up, right? Can we catch and drive with footwork without traveling, without making an error? Can we throw a certain number of passes, right? You can play some competitive, just keep away kind of passing games. Like, how many passes can we throw before it gets deflected or stolen? And then we can get into like more individual skills where my mind goes like, can we get to the basket in less steps? Can we get there in less number of dribbles, right? Like I imagine most of your sixth grade girls might take three dribbles to go from the 3 point line to the basket, right? And by eighth grade, we want them to get there in one. It's like catch, punch it. I'm getting to the rim in one dribble. Like trying to improve that. Percentage made of shots is always an easy one. The number of options they can use effectively. So I often ask players, even going into high school, like, hey, how many finishes do you have that are game ready? If you think about a right hand regular layup, what we call the pizza pan push, right? And a left hand pizza pan push, that's two options. And most of them will say, like, well, three, because I can also do a floater, or five, because I can also do a reverse layup. But thinking about, as an individual player or as a team, like, okay, we're capable of this many options in this scenario. And I'm going to just build two more so that we have two more possibility ways to score instead of just like, they blocked my vanilla pizza pan layup and I have no idea what to do now, right? And like, I'm not driving anymore as a sixth grade girl because I got blocked on my right hand layup and I don't have another option, right? And then another one I really like is decision speed in seconds, right? And so like I'll exaggerate this and call it the sundial shot, whereas like a player catches and holds a couple seconds. It's like we could time your shot with a sundial because the shadow moved across the earth by the time you actually made a decision to do something. And just speeding that up is like one of my favorite ways to improve player, aggressiveness and like the confidence factor we always talk about is really comes from that. It's like I know I can shoot on this catch and I know I can drive and making the decision within 1 second is like the best lever I have to be more effective against any defense. And so, if you measured an individual player and said, "Hey, you're taking 3 seconds to make a decision here on the catch. We're going to try to move that to 1 second and just track that over time." And then metrics in a game, we can do, of course, field goal percentage is a simple one. We talked about the contrast of that last week, how that's kind of a broader umbrella that doesn't give us a lot of really clear data that we can compare things with. We could also take number of field goal attempts, right? So like Jay's team again is just fresh in my mind. I'm going to keep going back to that as an example, but sixth grade girls, right? They might only take one shot per game for some of them. And like, hey, we're going to try to improve that. We want you taking 5 shots per game here. And so like if you're open, shoot it. And like we're trying to do all this work on offense to get you open. Number of free throw attempts, right? You can model after SGA, average 20 free throws per game. How much can you get to the line by being aggressively attacking and getting fouled? Free throw percentage made, of course. Points per shot value, we went into a lot last week. If you guys didn't get to watch that, I recommend going back to that. A lot of good data there to help you kind of guide your decision making as a coach, as well as relay some of the simple factors of that to your players. And then on the error side, right, number of travel errors, number of turnovers, what things that we could try to work on decreasing. But again, like you could take a 5 game sample as you're getting into the start of your season, like just measure everything over 5 games and like, okay, this is our average per game. Now, next 5 games, we're going to try to move some of these key factors. And at a middle school level, you're probably not going to tackle all of these. I recommend picking like 3 to die by, right? It's like these 3 things are so important to me that I'm going to die on the hill of make improvement on these 3 factors. And they can be really anything across. I'll talk about some more examples on a broader spectrum as we wrap up at the end today. So the next factor I like to look at is balancing the difference between consistency versus variable practice, right? And so like a drill in most terms is very consistent, right? It's like you are doing this thing very predictably. There's probably not live defense, at least yet, and there's probably not a decision you need to make. And so it's very consistent, but it also doesn't translate very well to the game situation. Variable practice is where you're either moving or have the option for a couple different possibilities on every rep, right? So the classic contrast is I have it listed here: block versus random practice. So if you think about shooting, block practice would be you stand in the corner and you shoot 5 shots in a row, right? It's a block set standard versus random practice is we're going to drive and kick. And so every shot you're going to be moving, but even more than that, you don't know which way you're going to be moving. And we might even throw live defense into closing out to you when you catch it. And so we do want you shooting. This is shooting practice, but it's randomized movement, realistic shooting practice that just translates a lot better to games is really the outcome we're going off of. And back to the point I made already about the 11 man drill is one that sticks out in my mind. I had a coach once that tried to set it up and run it with his high school team, and he didn't know how to teach it well enough, and it was a disaster. But we spent like a half of our practice trying to tackle it. And so like most of our time with younger teams especially is spent learning a drill versus actually getting to the execution of the skill that we really want to get out of that drill. And so I call it framework drills. We want to try to create a couple different structures that are really simple and really familiar to them over time and allow us to focus on different niches within that framework, right? So it's like a scaffolding is another way to think about it. But we set up this scaffold. This is how people move around the drill. This is where people are positioned for this game. And now coach is saying like it's head on a swivel day. Like you're gonna get points every time you swivel your head twice before you stop the end of the possession, whatever that may be. And then trying to find ways to put live play within that framework, right? And that really increases the variability. So it's not just 2-on-2. She always passes here, and we always swivel our head this way. It's like it's live 2-on-2, and if you're not swiveling your head, she's probably back cutting you and getting a layup, right? Or on the offensive side, if you're not stepping to the ball, the defense is incentivized to go steal that pass because you're standing still, or it's going to get thrown out of bounds, trying to avoid the defense. And so moving to the pass can now be our variability that we're trying to reinforce. Like, hey, you get 2 points every time you step toward the pass when you catch it, and we're just going to play a live game with just that constraint on it. And then really what we want to get out of having more variable practice is getting decision reps. And so we talked about even week 1, I talk about as a focus funnel, is a term I borrow from Tag Teach, but kind of funneling their mind into a very specific decision. So they might have a few different variables going on, but regardless, we're going to end up with them driving with a defender in front of them, and they have to choose, are they going to finish over or through that defender, or are they going to kick it? And just getting that decision reps inside of even the same game of 2-on-2 swivel allows them to really get a lot out of even a few minutes of a framework drill that's set up like that. Another one I really like to use is a one-on-one cone attack. I think Jay's probably seen me do this in clinics in the past with the Portsmouth Rec, but we have 2 players dribble out. One dribbles out around a cone, another one runs out around a cone on defense, and they meet in the middle. And it's just great for ball handling and for finishing and for defense because you got to scramble on defense to cut off the ball or they get a layup. Offense, you got to come around a corner and change direction with your dribble and probably change speed to break free a little bit and try to go get a finish at the rim. And so we can use that framework all the time and say, hey, today we got to finish only downhill. So you can't stop and pivot back. You can't shoot a jumper. It's got to be at the paint, going toward the rim. Or on defense, it's like, we're going to give you 5 points if you stop them outside the paint and make them shoot over you. And you can just kind of infinitely move your knobs and levers within that same framework or scaffold in order to get a lot more out of it. And again, without spending the time to learn a whole new drill to tackle this other one thing. We're consistently using the same framework and we're just zeroing their attention on different aspects. Might be a different day of the week. We got a different focus, but we're using the same framework. That makes sense to you guys? Yeah, cool. Progression of skill certainty. So this kind of goes back to another thing Jay and I were talking about is I guess where to start, right? So like if you're going to teach defense, it's our in our mind, we have this big picture. Like we know how 5-on-5 works. We know how they're going to need to rotate. We know they need to talk. We know they need to get their positioning right. And so we kind of jump to the solution to a problem that we know is going to happen. And I guess my approach has always evolved more and more toward let them experience the problem first, right? Or at least show them the big picture. Come back to the idea of the whole part whole. I want to show them the whole thing first, maybe let them experience the problem or the desirable difficulty is a term I borrowed from my mentor Noah LaRoche. Just have it be difficult in a good way, right? It's not like the where coaches go off the rails. I think is trying to create artificial adversity. Like we're going to try to make this extra hard in kind of a stupid circusy way that has nothing to do with basketball, right? It's more like here's the game, and we're gonna put 3 players in the paint. And when you drive and try to crash through 3 players, you're gonna realize it doesn't work, and you need to kick it out to your teammate. And we're just allowing them to experience the problem. And then the second stage I like to do, once they've experienced the problem, is show them the solution in kind of slow motion. So break it down more in a drill setting. Like, hey, they're going to do this. You're going to do that this way in slow motion. And therefore, this happens instead. Right. And so it's showing them a solution. And then trying to get more shots. So thinking about this on the offensive side, making more shots through technique and shot selection, right? So let's say they were getting their shot blocked, and the breakdown is like, all right, here's shot mechanics, how we want this to work. Shoot it from your chin, finish elbow to eyebrow, right? And then shot selection is like, don't shoot it, contest it off the and get to the rim on the other side. And then kind of evolving that to the idea of creating an attacking space, which is kind of where I circle back to with our players really often. Is like, okay, what is this move for? Well, it's for creating space. Great. So now we create a space. What's the next step? Well, now we create a space. We need to attack space, right? And whether that's an individual move or a team offense, like really all we're doing is creating an attacking space all the time. And then as they get good at that, like we're not only creating that big picture and breaking it down and showing them how to use the technique. And now we've got the space to create an attack to get the technique where it should be working. Now we're going to try to make faster decisions, right? And this is where we probably see the most errors is like, okay, we did the slowdown, we got it to work, you guys understand it. Now, like, let's put some gasoline on the fire, let's make it faster, right? And it's now like, okay, I made the wrong decision and I lost the ball. I made the right decision and I missed the shot, right? And I just get reps with that. And then eventually, what I think of as level 6 here is eliminating errors such as traveling, right? Through improved awareness and just consistency of footwork and just repetition of decision making. Like if I can make a decision fast in the right situation, make the right decision, then it really just comes down to can my body execute what my brain is telling me to do at speed? And my favorite word for that is fluency. Just think about like speaking a language fluently. Like if you were a fluent Spanish speaker, you would be thinking in Spanish and your words would be just flowing easily from your brain to your tongue as if you were speaking English, which is your native tongue. And so if you think about basketball built in that way, it's like we are building like grammar structure, big picture. We're building, tiny pieces of technical pronunciation of a word would be the analogy. And then we are working on how to structure sentences and making decisions. And eventually we get to where it's fluid, like we're thinking and doing basketball without stopping and consciously applying conscious thought to it. So I think about this as kind of the progression, again, I call it skill certainty. Kind of the first step before we would talk about confidence is we have to have certainty, right? We need to kind of go through this progression with a certain skill and get to the point where it feels pretty fluent, at least at the pace and the level of competition that we're used to right now. And then we are able to do that in a game, and that eventually leads to confidence, which in my mind over time produces aggressiveness, which is like the ultimate golden ideal that every coach and parent wants, right? We want my player to be aggressive, but typically they're skipping a couple steps ahead. Like this sixth grade girl that's never played basketball before, we want her to be aggressive. And she's like, I don't know what to do here, right? And so we kind of have to go through this progression of helping them build it in a way that makes sense. And I think more and more I think about it as a very narrow niche, right? It's like this might be just for shooting and maybe even shooting on the catch, right? And over here is ball handling and they have no idea, right? And it's like we got to spend some time on getting ball handling through this kind of progression to where it feels fluent. And then it might be defense as a category we got to work on getting fluent. And so players don't develop equally across all skills is kind of where my mind has evolved to be. And so this kind of progression in certainty kind of has to happen in multiple layers on multiple skill sets and therefore over multiple weeks or months or sometimes years with players to really get to the point where they feel fluent across the board and really comfortable and confident in their game. Um, so the next one I like to talk about is measurable results in games. So a all improvements should show up objectively, right? So I try to stay away from just the eye test or the intuition I have as a coach, which there is some value to, but we can also go wildly off track with, we were watching this one player and we saw her do it and we didn't watch the other player that did something different or better or whatever. And so our attention wasn't there, and therefore we don't know it was there. So I'm a big fan of using film to review games, review practices even, and look at more objectively, what am I measuring? Can I say, we're looking for head on a swivel. She did it 4 times. This girl did it only once. We need to work on her more and get that more repetition, get comfortable with that. And then looking for leading indicators, right? So steals is my favorite one. Actually, it was part of a study we did across multiple different levels of basketball with a mentorship program I was in, and really found that it was 3-to-1 ratio of deflections that became steals, right? And so you could only measure steals, but it happens 3 times as much. The player touches the ball, like defensive gets a deflection, touches a pass or a dribble and it doesn't become a steal. But if you point your players' attention on the deflections, they will get a lot more steals rather than only counting it, only congratulating them or rewarding them when they actually end up with the ball in a steal. It only happens 1/3 as much. So if you can point their attention toward the deflections, like, hey, go touch that pass, go touch that dribble, just be a disruptor and a deflector all the time, suddenly your whole team can be the whole level of defense can be raised to where you're getting a lot more steals because 5 players are focused on trying to just touch the ball on a deflection. Third, I have making intangibles tangible, right? So trying to measure them from film is one way. Try to take your things like your culture or your energy or like what you want to have as like teammate commitments or teammate culture. I'm thinking of another word, but how can you measure that? Sometimes it's high five, sometimes it's pats on the back, sometimes it's how many people on the bench are clapping during each time a player comes out of the game, right? You can pick a whole number of different things, right? But like the energy player who dives on the ball the most, right? You can just kind of take whatever you want that's intangible and find a way to measure it and make it a metric that you can track and that you can point players to. Um, and then I think about, how some of this starts to stack up. So back to the player certainty. If you get them to be confident enough to shoot and decisive enough, making quick decisions to drive, and they're certain enough in their footwork to avoid traveling, they probably get 4 to 6 more scoring opportunities per game as an individual player than they otherwise would, right? If they're like, I'm not sure if I should shoot this, so I didn't, right? I am not sure if I should drive or if I should pass right now, and so I didn't drive. And I'm not sure I got called traveling last week, so I'm not sure if I should drive right now. My footwork, it's not consistent, so I don't. And suddenly they're like shooting themselves in the foot. They're shooting your team in the foot by not taking opportunities they do have. And if you can kind of just fill the holes in the bucket, it's kind of how I think about this, then suddenly we got 4 to 6 times more scoring opportunities per player, even, and our whole team is just attacking more aggressively. Like more action is happening, more shots on goal are taking place because we're kind of plugging those holes in their bucket and giving them the green light to go for it and giving them the confidence that they should take that shot, they should decide quickly, and they should definitely drive and trust that they've got the right footwork going on. And then the next aspect of this is playing the long game. So, trying to change the mindset of a single player. I think you guys are working with players young enough where they're still pretty malleable and open to input. And I think as you get up to high school freshmen and high school 10th graders, it becomes more and more of, you got to have some pretty hard evidence to point to and prove that what they're doing and what they see as like their best thing that they might be successful at is actually evidence shows they're hurting the team by doing it that way, and we need to change their mind, right? And so like they might think they are the best shot blocker ever, and they're getting 3 blocks a game, but when you point out on defense, their players blowing by them 6 times a game and causing havoc with the rest of our defense because they're not in a good position or a good stance. They're not containing a drive. They're just making up for it with some athleticism and a block at the end. It's like, if you could stop 6 more drives a game at the start, we'd rather have that than you just getting more blocks that, kind of have the glory attached to them of getting a block shot. Um, and I like to kind of pull all this together into what's commonly called the competitive cauldron. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that term. Does that ring a bell for either of you? You heard of that, Jay?
No.
No, you should look it up. There's a lot of people use that. I don't know who originally invented it, but if you look on YouTube, just search competitive cauldron. Basically, it's a way to structure your practice very competitively using metrics like this. So just like, hey, we got a head on a swivel leader this week. Was Ruby, and we had our one-on-one cone attack ball handling game. Winner was this player, and basically, we just have like a leaderboard that builds out of that. But from all the stuff that we're tracking, we're really driving the competition using the metrics that we want them to work on, right? So it might be the number of times that you stopped a drive with being the big and scary, being the help defender versus only stopping your own player, right? And again, you can go anywhere you want. There's like infinite possibilities with this stuff. But if you can think of like 3 to 5 metrics that are really important to you as a coach and constantly be talking about them, measuring them, and even showing them on a leaderboard of who did the best this week in those metrics, then everybody's attention is constantly on it, and you can just drive the impact of that, way more than just talking about it is really what we're after. Um, and then to summarize here, what I really like to leave you with is measure everything, but try to pick 3 to 5 important metrics that you want to live and die by, right? So again, defense, we talked about a few weeks ago, the level 2 contest. If you're inside of 6 feet with your hand up, we're going to give you 2 points for that, right? How many times can we do that as a percentage of all the shots that were taken in a practice at first or in a game? However, you could best measure that, but let's set a baseline percentage, right? Right now it's 50% that we're getting there with our hand up. Can we get that to like 70% where we're just causing 20% more misses on the other team, and we're getting 20% more rebounds, and we get 20% more fast breaks, and suddenly our whole team is doing wildly better from this one, again, kind of leading indicator. I would put this in that category of contesting shots. Second would be, could be an offensive points per shot value, right? How efficient are we at scoring? And for our middle school teams, it might be zero point 0.5 is pretty good. Points per shot. Every time, every 4 times down the floor, we make a 2 point shot. We average zero point 0.5 points per shot attempt. And again, take that as a baseline value, maybe from your first game, maybe from your scrimmages in practice if you want to, or bigger picture, maybe on a 5 game trend in the season, and then work on how we're going to improve that. Where is that showing up? And then energy and culture again, number of team touches. I just happened to read a study. I forget where it was made by, but they were measuring team success based on how much the team interacted physically, how much touching they had going on, right? It was hugs, it was high fives, it was fist bumps and back slaps, like whatever touching was happening. The teams with more touching had a way better positivity of culture and actually a better winning percentage by a lot. I think it was like 36%, something different like that. And so, you can pick again infinite possibilities here what you're measuring, but this is one of my favorites now to think about. It's like, hey, how often are we high-fiving? How much are we interacting and touching each other? Because that really is a sense of camaraderie. I think Ian put on the chat a minute ago.
Yeah, and BJ, on that onto that to that point as well.
Yeah.
For Cohen's Sanford Spartans tryouts, that's why one of the biggest reasons he made the team is because the woman who runs the whole thing came over to me after, and that she noticed Cohen high fiving everybody and cheering everybody on and picking everybody up off the ground when they fell in scrimmages. And she's like, that kind of intangible stuff does not go unseen. And I know they're trying to build that culture with this team. So,
Yeah, that's great.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
cool.
really good example. So yeah, it's another way of, making the intangibles tangible. It's like, a lot of it's kind of a cliche almost out there in sports world with like, measure the intangibles or, he has a lot of the intangibles, but usually nobody's measuring them, right? And so it's like actually, if someone was statting out that tryout, they said Cohen had 55 physical touches with his teammates where he helped somebody or high-fived them or gave them some positive support through touch compared to the next guy was only 25 touches, right? And like that just shows up. And I think it really does have a big impact. I think the point of the study, kind of their summary was, teams that touch are not mad at each other, right? It's like very easy to give your teammate the cold shoulder and walk the other way. But
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you're high-fiving them all the time, it's like, hey, we just had a bad play. I'm saying my bad and we're high-fiving, or we just had a great assist and we're high-fiving. Either way, it contributes to that positive camaraderie. So
And,
I really
and
like
back to and back to that point too, where you guys were talking earlier about talking to each other. That like Cohen's or travel team just won a tournament this past weekend, and that was the biggest thing that I took away from it. And I talked to the other coaches about it. Is that I noticed the team was talking to each other, and they weren't arguing. They weren't like, no, I have. They were like, yeah, you go get him. Okay, cool. And they would just do their job, but like with respect to who was
yeah,
leading the charge at that time, and it
that's
was
great.
awesome.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So then wrapping up, next week's going to be our final call on Thursday, November 6th, as usual, 1 p.m. And then we're going to do a clinic at our gym on Saturday, November 8th. So we're going to go from 2 to 4 p.m. At our gym here at the Hoops Lab in Portsmouth. And I really want to open this up. I'd love to get, 6 or more coaches. I think 3 of you have said yes so far. I guess Ian was kind of a maybe, waiting on tournament schedules and such. But if you've got other coaching friends, like really anyone interested is welcome to come. I'd love to just get more bodies on the floor, get more questions, kind of troubleshoot, ideas or questions you guys have, and then walk through a lot of what I just talked about with some of the common framework drills I like to use, some of our best concepts and kind of how we visualize them and introduce them to players, and then some simple skill progressions like Jay was talking about, the two-step layups before you had the ball, like connecting the dots to the player's mind, and like kind of giving you a way to connect the dots with all the ideas we've been talking about here virtually. Try to connect that down to the where the shoes meet the court, and give you guys some better grasp of like how you could execute that when you're actually with your team.